Hi there, welcome back to IndyCar on, what is it today, the 13th? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the 13th of November. Anyway, the problem I see at the moment with the news is that it's all about what is going to happen in the next general election. You're probably already sick of hearing about Sunak Braverman, whatever you want to call her, but we all know now that she's gone, and Rishi Sunak has replaced her with someone supposedly clever, so James Cleverly, as the new Home Secretary. What was more of a surprise to me was he resurrected David Cameron, of all people, David Cameron, as the new Foreign Secretary. Perhaps he sees him as a safe pair of hands. I don't know, but it's an interesting choice because Cameron himself is primarily a European, and that is an interesting choice for Sunak to make. Whether Cleverly will be any better than Braverman is debatable, but one thing's for sure, he couldn't be any worse. Braverman took, I think, what her predecessor had done in terms of being overtly racist and xenophobic and every other kind of phobic that you can think of, multiplied it by about 100 with her unauthorised personal comments in a major daily paper. And that's obviously what got her the sack. But that's not really the point here. This shows that, or through this reshuffle, the way the Tories are planning ahead. Because this is almost exactly what happened during the tenure of John Major, after Thatcher was famously ousted in the night of the Long Knives. In the golden age, if you like, just post-Thatcher, after she had disappeared, John Major presided over the, I think you would call it the decline of the traditional Tory party at the time, and was seen as the grey man, a rather colourless character who lacked any kind of real charisma. I think Sunak, although he has a little bit more charisma than Major, lacks a lot of the far-right tendencies that many in the Tory party are espousing at the moment. And I think what Sunak has done is draw a line in the sand, saying that he, at least, out of all the Tories, is not going to be lurching that far to the right, and replacing Braverman with Cleverly, I think, basically lays down a marker to the far-right elements in the Tory party that Sunak's not one of them. However, what Suella Braverman has done is not only make sure that she was sacked, but send up a great big flare and a huge dog whistle signal to all the far-right extremists in the Tory party that she's the one who really should be leading the Tory party at the next general election, because I think it's widely expected now that with Sunak, kind of a lame duck Prime Minister now, with a very moderate-seeming cabinet, it looks as though the Tories are going into the next general election to lose on purpose, because it would appear at least that the Labour Party is basically putting on the clothes of the Sunak sort of regime, if you like, and occupying the centre-right of politics in a move which has many Labour supporters spraying their cornflakes out in the morning when they read the latest thing that the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has said or done. So I think we're seeing a realignment of the Tory party. Suella Braverman has basically flagged herself up as the next far-right leader of the Tory party post next general election loss, because I'm pretty certain, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty certain the Tories are going to lose pretty heavily to the new grey man of politics, Sir Keir Starmer, the man who really isn't a Labour leader at all and isn't leading a Labour party, but leading a Tory party called Labour with a red rosette. So what all this means basically is that party politics has taken over, and the short-term media attention span is all taken up with wondering about what's going to happen in the next general election. Now, on the same topic, incidentally, there was a bizarre occurrence in Westminster the other day when Kenny McCaskill, who, if you remember, defected from the SNP to Alba, rose to give a speech in the House of Commons on the amount of renewable electricity generated in Scotland, which was being exported virtually for no cost, really, to the English national grid. But as he rose to speak, the entire SNP group on the front benches opposite walked out. Now, what was all that about? Well, I think, again, we're talking party politics here. We know there's no love lost between ALBA and the SNP. But that kind of snub is a very public expression of the internecine battling that's going on between the two parties of independence. With ALBA, although tiny, let's face it, they've only got really a few representatives, but they have now got representation in both governments, with Ash Regan and with others in Holyrood, as well as at Westminster. But they are a very tiny voice at the moment, still led by Alex Salmond. And again, in terms of internecine warfare, Alex Salmond made a comment the other day that he thought that Humza Yousaf was making a mistake in trusting the Scottish Greens during the next general election, because he felt that something that was said by Lorna Slater, in which she said that independence was not a red line for the Greens in Scotland when it came to doing deals with other parties. And that, Mr. Salmond has interpreted as a remark which makes the Green Party in Scotland not a trustworthy partner for the SNP to be in bed with. In other words, he felt that the SNP should dump the Greens at the next general election and in subsequent Holyrood elections as being not trustworthy on independence if they are prepared to do a deal which would usher in a unionist Labour coalition in Holyrood. Now, whether you think this may happen or not, it's very obvious to me that all of the major parties in Scotland and in England are all laying the groundwork for the next general election and possibly in Holyrood elections thereafter. And that tells me that the focus on independence itself has now taken a very, very distant back seat in terms of its priority for all of the major parties, even those which espouse independence, including the SNP, ALBA and the Greens, with all of them battling each other. And these ridiculous snubs that are happening at the moment are really rather, I think, unhelpful. Let's put it that way. I'm not taking sides in this, just making an observation here. However, it also does raise a point. Kenny McCaskill's speech raises a point about the amount of renewable energy which the Scottish Government claims has been provided by the Scottish generating system. In other words, the renewable energy system of Scotland. How much of potentially the European renewable energy that's available, how much of that is either being generated by the Scottish wind power arrays, tidal energy systems and so on, and how much could be. Now, in the past, previous to 2014 and the referendum, the SNP had claimed that Scotland possessed about 25% of the available, this is an interesting phrase, the available renewable energy for Europe. Now, that claim has now apparently been changed. The SNP has admitted that that estimate was an overestimate, and they published figures which showed that the real figure at the moment of connected, now this is not potential, this is connected renewable energy generation which Scotland currently has, represents somewhere between 9 and 10% of Europe's actual needs in terms of renewable energy which are available from, shall we say, the Scottish domain. Now, you might think, okay, that's fair enough, that's an adjustment. Everybody estimates things. Estimating how much power a country can generate from renewables is extremely difficult to do anyway, and perhaps it was an overestimate at the time, but it was an estimate of what the expected capacity could become rather than what is connected at the moment. However, it's given fuel for unionists to start criticising the SNP government for allegedly trying to conceal this fact from the electorate. The way that the SNP disseminated this information didn't help that. According to all the news sources that I can locate, the facts about this came out in a a flood of data, of new revised data coming out from the Scottish Government in recent months in a report, I think, last month. And it took a long time for other parties to discover what the S&P was actually saying about renewable energy and how much of Scotland's exported renewable energy represented a percentage of European needs in the future. But I think it's important to remember one thing, that 9 or 10% of the renewable needs of the European Union might not sound very much, but if you consider the fact that the European Union is 28 countries, not just one country, 28 of them, representing 10% of the potential renewable energy resources for 28 countries, is an amazing achievement for such a small nation as Scotland. And even if we had less than that, even if it was 5%, it's still a large amount of renewable energy for one single country to produce for 28 others. And you have to remember that not only is it generating that capacity for Europe, it's also generating that capacity for itself, for England, for Wales, and possibly even for Northern Ireland. So we are doing the job in multiple levels for multiple countries, numbering probably 30 or more nations, and supplying 10% of their energy needs. That's an enormous amount of renewable energy flowing out of Scotland into the general sort of mishmash of the national grid of England, the interconnectors which connect us to mainland Europe, to Iceland, to Ireland, to nearby France, Belgium, who knows where else. So the potential has always been there, and it will probably increase rather than diminish. However, I think when it comes to trying to make sense of what's happening at the moment, the Tories are positioning themselves at the moment, dividing as usual between the centre-right and the far-right. The centre-right currently is winning under Sunak. Sunak will lead a centre-right Tory party to a defeat at the next general election because Keir Starmer is less bad, apparently, in England than the Tories. And he's attractive enough to moderate Tory voters to feel safer than somebody like Suella Braverman, who is so overtly racist and xenophobic and doesn't care how she comes across as a populist dog whistle politician in the same mould as Trump. It's rather appalling, actually, to hear the same kind of dog whistle incitement to violence from a distance as used to come out of the mouth of the great orange balloon Trump, now coming out of the mouth of a woman, and a woman of colour as well, which I think I find somehow more appalling than it would be coming from anybody else. However, the fact of the matter is Braverman is positioning herself to be the next far-right leader of the Tory party post the next general election defeat. That seems to be her plan. As far as the SNP, ALBA and the Greens are concerned, they're all at each other's throats. So from the point of view of a pro-independence campaigner like myself and somebody who's trying to guide people on how to think about this, I think we have to stop looking at the here and now, because the here and now is a mishmash of conflicting stories. What we need to focus on is the fact that we cannot really be absolutely certain of our own pro-independence political parties right now. And whatever happens in the next general election, and whichever of the parties you intend to vote for in that general election, my own feeling is that as far as the independence campaign is concerned and the goal of achieving it, I don't think we will advance terribly far towards it. In which case, and I'm moderating my language here, I'm not saying we're going to fail, and I'm not saying, by the way, that Humza Yousaf's plan to try to negotiate independence if they win a majority of seats would fail. I just think that the English government will just nix it. They will just say no to everything. However, if that's the case, we need to look further ahead. And the only way in which a country such as Scotland can achieve its independence when its political parties of independence are squabbling amongst themselves is to have a liberation movement which has a longer view, a view 10 or 25 years ahead. I know this sounds appalling to think about it in those terms, but that's the reality we face right at the moment. Nobody is doing anything to say that if we won the next general election on seat count, we would declare independence, or that we would empower our own parliament to hold a referendum so that we could decide upon independence properly in a democratic way, which is actually what's required. So in the absence of all these solutions, the only real solution is for those of us who are still really determined to see independence happen and can't see a way forward. If you are already a member of a group, if you are affiliated with a group, let's say you were affiliated with All Under One Banner, which organises all of the big mass events so successfully across Scotland, try to encourage All Under One Banner. And I know one or two of the people in All Under One Banner, if they affiliate, for example, through Salvo and join the Liberation Scotland movement, once that liberation movement reaches a certain level, let's say it gets above 100,000 signatories, that would be groups of individuals joining as groups rather than just individuals. Let's say we reach 100,000. That enables us to send delegations to places like the European Union, the European Court of Rights, the International Court of Human Rights and so on, the International Court of Justice, the European Commission, the Council of Europe and so on. There's so many organisations outside of the British cage that we could approach with legal representations under international law. Now that would be one step. If that liberation movement achieves a critical mass where the numbers of people now affiliated in their groups, let's say it reached something like more than half of the electorate, and that would be probably approximately 1.8 million people, let's say, for talking sake, roughly about that. I think the current voting franchise is approximately 3.6 million Scots who are eligible to vote and registered to vote. But if we reach that halfway point and exceed it, then something interesting happens, because you have more than half of the electorate wanting independence and having affiliated themselves with an organisation which represents that. It is far easier then for us to campaign for it when we know we already have the high ground of a majority, a big one, not just 48% or 51%. That magic 60% will probably be exceeded, but it will take time. But only a people's movement can achieve this when the political parties are squabbling the way they are at the moment. So unless something drastic happens with the SNP, ALBA and the Greens, and they either stop fighting and campaign together properly, or there's a total change in the party system after the next general election, depending on how it goes, who knows what the future holds. But I think we need, as independence campaigners, to look further ahead and stop worrying about what the political parties are doing and actually start taking action ourselves, because that is the way countries free themselves from oppression, not through political parties entrenching themselves in different parliaments and fighting amongst themselves. That just doesn't work. That only serves the unionist cause. Keep us divided, keep us squabbling. The only way to unite yourselves is to unite all of the people themselves in one gigantic organisation, which isn't a political party initially, but which could become a political party when it has sufficient mass to do it. But that's going to take time. At the present, I don't see any realistic prospect of any of the pro-independence parties actually getting together, negotiating between themselves to form a super party, and actually saying that if they win a majority of seats in the next general election, they will empower the Scottish Parliament to hold a referendum under the authority of the sovereign Scots who elected them in the first place. Unless this happens, there isn't a chance of a proper referendum being staged, not by the political parties we have at present. So I'm sorry if this sounds negative, but I'm just trying to reflect the reality of the situation that we're in. I don't see a way around this unless the three supposedly pro-independence parties stop fighting each other and actually turn their attention to fighting the cause instead. And that is where we're at the moment. As far as the Tories are concerned, they're going to be out of government for quite a while. The danger here is that what comes next after let's say we get a Starmer government, what happens after they try to put the country back together and don't manage to repair the damage done by the Tories is we will see a further jump to the right. The people, particularly in England, are being radicalised by idiots like Braverman, who basically is a modern-day fascist, and she's shown her true colours. I mean, there's no doubt about what she said in the papers and how it affected events on the ground on the day before the armistice celebration. And the media is playing its role in that as well. Oh, incidentally, with regards to media, things will happen in the next year or so, which hopefully might change the balance in our favour, but more of that when I know something about it. In the meantime, that's it from IndyCar today. It's food for thought. If you have any comments to make, you can, of course, make them on this channel right now. You can pause and rewind this video, incidentally, if you missed the start of it. And, of course, you can comment in the usual way. Anyway, that's it from me today. I'll be back again in the next few days, hopefully to report on something a bit more encouraging, if I get something more encouraging to report on. But thank you for continuing to support the channel. The donations are coming in a slow trickle, which is fine. That allows me to maintain things as they are. I'm not looking to raise tens of thousands of pounds for this channel. It is just a little drip feed that's necessary to keep me going along. So thank you to all my current donors and future donors as well. If you have a few quid to spare and you want to make an individual donation, you can use the link in the description on this video. If that link doesn't work, please let me know in a message and I will post a fresh donation link. Okay, I will see you all again soon. Thanks for watching to the end. Bye for now.